All right, welcome to Artcasters episode 380. That's 380 episodes. You could literally listen to an episode every single day of the year and not run out for, you could actually lap the year with one episode of Artcasters a day. So I give that challenge to any of our viewers. If you actually complete that and watch every single episode, maybe make a comment on each one as you do it. I think between the three of us, we could figure out a giveaway or something for somebody who would want to undertake that.
I'll throw something in for somebody who watches every single episode. Sure.
Yeah. If they want to, if somebody wants to be
on every single one.
Yes.
There will be a test.
There would be a test. We'd literally have to, once you've done it, you'd have to comment on the latest and say, "Hey, I did the challenge," and then we'd look back and be like, "Did you comment on every single one?"
That's where we need an intern.
And we have to actually calculate how long it would take if they were to do that in a row.
Yeah,
because if we get that next week, we're like, I don't think you could have watched that many of them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I think if somebody binged, I don't think they could get through 300. Well, maybe they'd watch like a minute of each episode or something.
Would we count it if somebody chipmunked us and like increased the speed to like 2x?
That's fair enough.
That's a fair point. Yeah. I know people who actually listen to YouTube videos like that, and I never understood it.
I do it, especially for tutorials. I listen for like the thing that I'm trying to find out, and then I slow it down.
Yeah, it's a smart way. Like I would imagine, I've been dipping into commentary a little bit on my YouTube channel, and there are some times where it would be beneficial to chipmunk it, because man, some debates I think today's that I was listening to, I got like maybe an hour in, and then I was like, I'm kind of glad I have to go for Artcasters later because this is awful.
I got a humble bundle of a bunch of audiobooks. So I mean, not the greatest quality narration. The stories are kind of fun, but like one narrator was so slow that listening to him on a time and a half, I was like, there we go. Like, it was like it's like a sci-fi book and stuff, and I'm like, holy crap, dude, speed it up. Anyway, time and a half was great. It was good.
And time and a half, he like speaks at a nice slow cadence. Yeah. I love it. It's just like once upon a time. Speaking of slow cadences, this is the Artcasters, episode 380. I am Joshua Kimball. You're on my channel, so if you guys haven't, obviously hit subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Make sure you've signed up for our newsletter. There's a link in the channel in the description below, so you get notifications because this show bounces from like my channel to Corey's channel. Used to be on Scott Cirkland's channel, and you never know whose channel it might show up on. And signing up for that newsletter is really going to help you out, especially because we're probably going to be switching to Sunday nights for future Artcasters. We're going to be we just like the extreme of the idea of this thing being like a monster truck rally, really. And so we're going to bring you monster truck rally energy on Sundays. That's basically, it's like the Artcasters Monster Truck Edition. So anyhow, if you haven't yet, pick up 2 stories in Jacob's Apartment, my 2 graphic novels. Make sure you are checking out I'm doing live streams all the time, so make sure you're checking those out. I've been doing commentary a lot lately, that kind of stuff. Other than that, that's basically enough about me. I think I'll go to Scott, although he's on mute. So if you want me to pass and go to Cory.
I just had some dogs barking in the background, so I can
got it.
A little bit. But yeah, so you can find basically the first thing I would tell you to go to is go to my YouTube channel where I have revamped everything, and I've so far I've got 2 videos up and 2 live streams that I've done in this kind of new format. Which is basically me reverse engineering all this cool stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, vintage nostalgia, stuff like that. I've done wax packs. I've done grow stickers. Next week, I'm going to tackle anaglyphic 3D art, which if you're on my Patreon, you've already seen that video.
Yes.
So, patrons get my videos a week early, plus like the assets and stuff that kind of go with each project and things like that. So, but definitely go check out the videos on my YouTube channel. It's Circworks Art Labs on YouTube. Other than that, you can go to my website where I have a number of digital products for making comics, including my Comic Maker Starter Kit, which is free. Download that and you get a bunch of free assets, and I've got a bunch of even more robust tools and things for making comics. So check that out, as well as my comic Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. Just think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. If you're into that kind of stuff, then check out my comics.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll just, say that like Scott's rebrand and relaunch of his YouTube channel is very inspiring and cool and very entertaining and engaging. And if you're not on his Patreon, you should be, because I feel like a special person being able to have seen the episode early. And I will tell you, it's consistent. Like, I don't know how he's doing this with the editing and the quality. It's so good. It's like it's almost as good as like a television show that you just see produced for, like a streaming network or something. I mean, it's very high quality work. And you guys should, Patreon, it's, throw him $1 or $2. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like expensive. And you get the videos early. I recommend that. And also Young and the Dead's a great book. All right, Cory. Cory, let everybody know where to find you, and then I'll introduce our special guest.
You can find me at my name with a .com at the end. So
I love it.
CoryKerr.com. And there's a couple main things you could do there. So you can check out the store where I've got shirts and hoodies and new phone cases, actually. So I'm gonna start doing some phone case stuff, some anti-phone cases. And then you can also get on the newsletter. And then you can also check out animations and comics and illustrations I've done.
Awesome. Okay, and our special guest is Cory. So we're trying to do, a series of videos on Artcasters where we're actually highlighting each other in a weird way, because quite often we're having guests on all the time, and we don't get to like highlight Cory's recent art journey. And like this interesting stuff he's been doing with esoteric crumble flux, and like the thinking behind it, and kind of like some of the thinking behind like where he's going directionally to like with his art, as well as like what his thinking is and what his aims are, and kind of get a little bit behind the wheel of like what some of us are doing. So I think that I'm really excited about this one. It'll be fun to talk to Cory more specifically. I think the topic today is going to be communicating big ideas through art, and I think that's a great topic for Cory, because anybody who's familiar with Cory, quite often he's doing art that's added with like an essay. You should be subscribed to his newsletter to kind of read those. But there's a lot of thinking behind Cory's work, and it's one of the things that I think was one of the main reasons Cory and I initially started hanging out a lot, was just like we're weird people who overthink and put a lot of the thinking into our art. And so I think it'll be really a good episode. I will say this is like kind of an ask me anything kind of thing. So there's a couple questions we've gotten for Cory early on. As we're going, if you guys have questions for Cory, I saw Frank already gave a really great question in the chats, but in the chats, feel free to ask Cory anything, as long as it's, safe for YouTube TOS. I think we'll be good. And we'll get into it. So Cory, I have a few questions that were sent. Before any of those, I want to hear kind of your thinking. You've talked about it a little bit, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk about esoteric crumble flux, and maybe kind of recap a little bit of that initial spark. I think it had to do with a bookstore. Yeah. And then you could kind of get into like what your aims are with it, and then we can kind of start diving into some of those questions. I know Scott probably has a ton of questions for you too. So,
yeah, I'll try to be quick on this because I want to get to the questions. I'm kind of interested in what people want to talk about. But I think my real love with art is I'm kind of obsessed with ink. And very specifically, not like ink washes where you can get different values, but like ink itself, like just pure black on white paper. I find it really fascinating that you can get so many different textures and so many different values. But it's like the illusion of value because it's really just two values, the paper and the ink. So I've always loved kind of that aspect of it. And so when I started getting into art, that was really what I focused on. And I really only learned to color because I kind of felt like it would help my webcomic do a little bit better, and
Yeah.
people would be a little bit more interested in some of the stuff I was doing. But I think my true love is just pure black and white. And so I did a lot of color stuff. I did a lot of illustration. I kind of started taking drawing seriously when I was about 32, and I started a little experiment where I said I'm going to do this for 10 to 15 hours a week for 10 years. And if I don't like where I end up at the end of 10 years, I can say that I gave it a good shot and go do something else. And that 10 years was last year. So, and about 7 years into that, I got a little distracted and taught myself animation. Anyway, so after doing three,
and by the way, an award-winning animation. But anyhow, let's continue.
Yeah. So after getting 3 animated shorts out and a bunch of kind of, I don't know what you would call those, bumpers or just kind of playful animations or whatever, I was kind of itching to get back into just single illustrations. And kind of while I was getting a little burned out on animation, I was on vacation, and I was down in Utah and visiting family and stuff. And we went to, my sister kept saying, Cory, of all the people I know on this planet, you are the person that needs to go to this bookstore. And there's this bookstore called Moon's Rare Books. And the store itself is so bizarre. Anyway, it's this guy who made just an unheard of amount of money writing travel books. And then he turned around and started collecting rare books. And so he will find these rare books. Anyway, so they have a curator there that's there, and they change up the display all the time. They had a curator there, and she could kind of tell that I was like extra fascinated by like the wood engraved kind of illuminated texts. And she came up and said, "Are you an artist?" And I said, "I am, actually." And I said, I teach visual communication, illustration, animation, and graphic design, and up at BYU Idaho. And she said, "Oh, let me show you something." And so they opened the vault. There's this like literal vault that's in this store, and I guess they let professors and special whoever they deem worthy or whatever, I don't know, to go into this vault. And so I said, can I just look at anything? And she's like, yeah, just tell me and I'll get it down for you. And I said, I want to see the oldest Bible that you have, and I want to see anything that you have that's illustrated Shakespeare. And so I was able to look at, I'm going to get the dates wrong, but I think it was a 14th century illuminated Bible and a 17th century, is that right? 17th century Shakespeare, illustrated Shakespeare. And I just spent hours just taking pictures with my phone of these illustrations, and it was just incredible. And so then it was my wife and I were on an anniversary trip, and so we went back to our Airbnb, and I spent like the next few movies as we were watching movies together, just like sketching and trying to kind of nail this, like some of the techniques that I had captured on my phone. And that was the beginning of this idea where I started to see if I could mix. I had done that comic for a little bit that I'll probably revisit again, the Ye Olde Modernity, where I was mixing modern day problems with ancient culture. And so it was kind of like, it was like kind of a town full of medieval people. But the different castes of people would represent different types of occupations or governments or, tech companies or whatever. And so I kind of played with that a little bit, but I liked the idea of doing this idea of mixing modern and ancient. And so Esoteric Crumbleflux came out of this thing that I've been a little bit fascinated with lately of I find things like pregnancy, and the fact that we still have human beings on the earth, kind of faith promoting, because there are so many different things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
That to me, it's a miracle that they go wrong so seldom, right? I mean, like if you start looking at everything that can happen, the slightest little derivation or mutation can just make a pregnancy not viable. And then if you zoom out a little bit, there are actually, society as a whole is really fragile. Like the fact that we still exist and have new generations of people and have for tens of thousands of years, to me is really faith promoting, because I just find it really interesting, all the different ways that things could end. And so I thought that would be kind of interesting. Let's mix like occult, tarot, wood engravings, metal engravings, currency, ancient symbolism from a bunch of different cultures with like some modern problems. And so kind of this idea of esoteric crumble flux was the idea of kind of this, rare kind of bizarre kind of niche ideas of societal collapse mixed with the free flow of information that's going on and society collapsing. So that's where esoteric, crumble, and flux came from. And it just sounded kind of fun. And so I set some rules for myself, and I kind of went out and just said, I'm just going to do only black and white, no grayscale. I'm going to try to mix in as much of kind of rich ancient symbolism as possible, and do it with modern problems. And so you'll see a little bit of heraldry, you'll see a little bit of tarot, you'll see a little bit of illuminated manuscripts, and a lot of that is coming from kind of, I'm just interested in ancient cultures. And then you mix that with, I think we've got some very fascinating modern problems going on today, with kind of what's going on with all kinds of things. And so I just pick a new thing that, has the potential to end society as we know it. And I do a little illustration. And then as part of that research of what I'm going to use as symbolism, I just like would deep dive, and I would come across so much information that it felt weird to not also like include like a video essay or a podcast or an article of like why, because I mean everybody says, oh, the bees are dying, and the simple response to that is like, it's cell phones, or it's pollution, when in actuality it's a combination of like half a dozen different things, one of which is my favorite thing to harp on because I think we need to fix it, which is putting all your eggs in one basket, the idea of no competition and kind of monopolies. And so anyway, so this kind of thing started,
all your bees in one bonnet then.
Yes. Yeah. The real problem, the main problem that we have with bees is that over a third of our food sources is pollinated by domesticated bees, and we only use one type of bee, even though wild species, of which there are hundreds, are significantly better pollinators. But that means that we have to stop like destroying wild spaces that are next to farms, because you need to destroy wild spaces, then you have to use domesticated bees, because the wild spaces don't allow for the kind of feral bees to be able to do it naturally. And so this idea that we take one type of bee and we put it on semi trucks and we drive it from farm to farm, it kind of just goes in this line of like, humans are really stupid that we think we're being efficient when we're actually reducing the amount of like safety redundancies that we have to keep our society from collapsing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I love that. I also just love the overlaps here, because like what you were just describing with black and white, and we're going to get into questions in a second. But it just resonates with me so much because Two Stories was specifically chosen to be in black and white because of a real deep dive I did into everything but in graduate school. And then I came to a similar conclusion where I was like, wait, why am I running from the thing I love? Like, it's the thing I love reading. It's the thing I love looking at. It's like, like my favorite thing are like black and white indie comics that have rad inks, and it's like for some reason just like commercialization had like pushed towards color, and I realized like if I had my way, that's the kind of book I would do. And it's there's just so many things that resonate. Even the bee thing, I'm obsessed with bees and bees dying and that whole thing. So there's so much I want to jump on, but I want to keep this one about you. So we're gonna get back to in an un-Josh like fashion. We're gonna get to the next question. By the way, anybody who's showing up in the chats, we got quite a few viewers. So right now, I'll just ask real quick: hit that like button while you're at it. Also, if you have questions for Cory, this is Cory's night. So ask away whatever you would have asked of Cory in the chats, and we'll get to those immediately. I'm going to try to get to the questions that were sent in before, and then we'll address chat questions as well. And I just think that's amazing, and I think it's just fascinating because Cory did this like almost around the same time that I think Jacobs came out, and it was just weird to me because we both had probably referenced similar dying bees. And like, it's just an interesting, again, it's like I feel a brotherhood connection. But also, while I'm looking for these, well, I guess we'll get into the questions. But one thing I do want to ask is, what do you think it is about you that takes a complicated idea like that? Like a lot of people out there might have a thought like, it's really fascinating that like bees are dying. It's this fascinating thing. What is it about you that will take that and then try to communicate almost the impossible in your art? Like what do you think it is that kind of draws you to like really challenging things to communicate?
I think you and I both are kind of at least quasi existentialists to some extent, and I think I'm trying to overlay some meaning and value into an absurd world, and so I feel like, and this sounds so pretentious as I'm thinking of it, but like I feel like one of the things that art does really well is it takes deeply misunderstood or complicated concepts and it distills it into something that words can't really get at as much. And so if I can take a visual, and I remember seeing like some political cartoons as a teenager and things that like the ideas of them that were conveyed through the juxtaposition of a concept or through the composition of something or through something like that, they landed so much more than things that I had read or things that I had heard, that I like the idea of just like, I don't want to provide any answers necessarily because I'm not egotistical enough to think that I have the answers, but I do like trust in people in general. Individuals bother me, but groups of people I trust as a whole. I feel like we can move things in the right direction as a group, as a society, right? And a lot of the things that I'm doing are kind of this kind of nuanced balance between what's best for the society and what's best for the individual, because those two things are at odds with each other.
Yeah.
And
almost inherently, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's always a push and pull, and I feel like communication in general, especially, I mean, this has been true since like the 80s, but it's been kind of enhanced and hit into the hyperdrive in the last 10 years, has become really polarized, really black and white, really simplified, and it lacks nuance, it lacks gray area, and it lacks deep critical thinking and creative thinking. And so, you know, it's like this us versus them tribalism that you get with like a jingoistic type of whatever, whether that's nationalities or whether that's race or whether that's ideological or politics or religion or whatever. There seems to be this pull towards othering people, but when you get people in a room together, they actually typically tend to get along. But when you separate them by screens and by text, they tend to polarize and attack. And so this idea of like, I would like to use visuals, which I think is a common connection for all of us, and symbolism, which is the only way that we can actually survive in the world without being massively overwhelmed by all of the input that we have constantly.
Yeah.
Is to break things down and into kind of like symbols. And I'd like to use that as a way of like, I want this to stick with you and land and plant the seed or the germ of a question.
Yeah.
In the hopes that some people smarter than me might find answers that they might not have thought of without having that question kind of planted. And so I'm not offering many solutions in my work, but I am saying I'm trying to shine a light in the corners that scares the cockroaches away so we can see what's there and maybe fix it or point it in the better direction.
I like that description too, because, and I think you do that very effectively in your work, where it may not even be entirely clear, but it does make you think about the topic that you often are writing about in the essay or in the, and showing in the work. It definitely raises questions, like, and to me, I think that's great because, like, even that bee, illustration is a really great example where it's like, even if somebody hadn't read the essay, they might be like, what's that with like dead bees? And then they might actually look into it themselves of like, why are bees dying? Like, that's an interesting question. Like, that's kind of a disturbing question. And like, I love the idea that you're using art to kind of do that, but also, I think anybody who's familiar with Cory, Cory's not cocky enough to think that he's going to solve all the world's problems, but the idea of kind of raising those great questions, that's great. Okay, let's get to Scott. Did you have anything before I get to the questions?
Mike, I had some questions, but I don't want to. They're not quite about this particular topic, so I don't want to jump all over the place. But just
okay. Do you want
to Cory's art journey in general and things like that? But so.
Okay, well, feel free to drop one if you want before I get into these.
I'll try to answer more quickly. I know I've given two.
Oh no,
15
no, Cory. That's one of the great things about you, man. You're going to be thorough. This will be a great episode. So, yeah.
I just think if I ask this question, it's gonna go in a whole different kind of direction.
Well, all of the questions I have are going in multiple directions, so that's okay.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm always fascinated. I'm and Cory's kind of talked about this, at least with us and stuff, but I'm always fascinated by how kind of late Cory started, and he kind of mentioned that, drawing and everything, but he also makes a good point that he's had years of previous experience before that, just creatively. And I know our paths kind of not crossed, but we had some similar things in that, Cory worked doing like themed environments and things like that, and I did some of that kind of stuff too. So I'm kind of fascinated by that and what
that is such a fun
you did there field. And how that kind of transitioned to now. I assume that's before you decided you were going to learn how to illustrate and everything, right?
Yeah, the annoying thing is I was actually in sales in that company rather than doing the fun stuff.
Oh, okay. I guess maybe I did know that.
Yeah, I learned a lot by observing, but they didn't let me touch any of the creative stuff. And so I was I was the director of marketing for that company, and so I got to sell stuff, and then I would upsell the customer on, I don't have a problem spending rich people's money, and so I do have a problem selling stuff to most people. But if you're going to spend $121,000 on a treehouse for your kid, I'm going to upsell the crap out of you. And so I was able to talk about really creative things, but the frustrating thing is then I would have to pass those notes off to somebody else, and they designed it, and other people built it, and then I got to take pictures of it at the end. But I was like,
but even that, I mean, that just that position, I could see how that comes in handy in just not that freelance illustration stuff is your full-time thing. You're also an educator, but the ability to do that for anyone that is sort of entrepreneurial or whatever, that's definitely, it's definitely going to help to have that kind of experience. So
yeah.
Sales for me anyway. That's something I just kind of taught myself along the way, and I don't know how good I am at it, but I kind of wish I was a little more educated in that a little earlier on. It would have helped, I think, help my career off earlier.
Yeah, I found early on that I am a fantastic closer. I'm a terrible finder. And so like I'm really good at the bottom of the sales funnel. I'm awful at the top of the sales funnel.
Yeah, leads are a weakness of mine too, man. Like that's always a tough one. That's a great question, Scott. Okay, so let's start with Jim was the first to get a question in, so I want to honor it. He said, "Question for Cory: what is something that makes you hopeful for the future generations, artistically and in general?" So maybe start with artistically and then maybe general.
Artistically, I think I was watching a video, and I think they kind of summed up how I feel about like generative AI and some of those things. They're saying, I think the most dystopian thing that I can think of is automating all of the creative jobs and leaving humans to do all of the grunt work. And there is an enduring drive within each of us to be creative. And from a faith standpoint, I think that's because we are children of the Creator. But even if you don't believe in God, I think you have to recognize that the thing that separates human beings from the rest of the animal kingdom is this idea of innovation and creation and rationality and creativity. And so I think like a major part of being human and why we are different from other monkeys is that there is this drive to create, even when those creations don't necessarily serve a practical purpose. And so throughout most of human history, maybe the last 70 to 100 years excluded, but most of human history up until this point has been like really everyone except for a very small percentage of people who have convinced everyone that they're somehow like better than everybody else because they're royal, is like living subsistence kind of survival, like day to day. And you're kind of living off the land. You're at the whim of all kinds of things that are like totally life threatening at all times. And even in those cases, people are like, I think I'm going to be a poet. I think I'm going to work the land, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to try to paint something or write something, or I'm going to, think about philosophy and so I think, and this might be a little bit pessimistic, but as long as there are humans, there will be art. Because I think if we lose art, we probably lose what makes us human. And I think that would be the end. And so I have a deep-seated faith in the fact that there will always be art and expression and creativity, because I think that is ingrained in humanity. Generally speaking, what makes me optimistic is kind of what we started talking about, where I was on a train. So I served a mission for my church when I was 19 to 21, and so I had a name badge on, and I was traveling across the country on this train, and the name badge is a bit of a target for people that want to argue with you. And these three scientists sat down, and one of them said, I'm a geologist, he's a physicist, he's a chemist, and we all work for the Scottish government. And he said, I see that you've got Jesus on your name tag there. And he said, I just, you mind talking about it? And I said, sure. And he goes, well, what is it about, like, you seem like a rational thinking person. How do you kind of come to grips with this idea that, I've got rocks that disprove the Bible? And I'm like, well, you don't, but yeah, I see what you're saying. And so what I said is, if you look at any type of science, we have no business being organized. And so the idea of continuing to be, in a positive upward swing of organization, meaning that we're not mutating into de-evolving. We're not mutating into something worse. We're not passing on like all these negative things. And that society generally is on an upswing, and that the world is generally on an upswing. When you have the laws of thermodynamics that would say that that everything should be breaking down into basic elements to be disorganized chaos. I said, I believe in the laws of thermodynamics. I also believe that there is a force that is balancing out entropy, which tends to be disorganized and chaotic because of the equalization of energy. And I think that there is a force out there. And I said, what do you think that force is that maintains things in face of, this degradation that we should have? And he said, well, I guess that's probably what you talk about. I said, yeah. And I don't think those two things are in conflict with each other. I think you can have deep thinking and logical thinking and science, and you can also have a recognition that science is describing forces that are keeping things in balance. And what I think that balance is something like that. And so I would say that my optimism is probably a little bit harder to explain logically, and is more faith-based. And so I do think that there is, I do think that God exists, and that there is a force that each of us has a light inside of us that is keeping us in an organized, positive flow. And so while there are forces that oppose that, some natural and some unnatural, I believe that the forces that are for good are stronger than the forces that are for evil. And so I believe in organization and positive flow more than I believe in degradation and de-evolution and a breakdown into basic element and chaos. And so,
oh man, I love it, Cory. That's so funny. We have to be careful tonight because I will just deviate on that. Because that just brings to mind. There's one thing I'll say on that brings to mind this classic kind of philosophy conundrum, which is like people who are too scientism about things. And don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of idiots out there who are of faiths that don't understand science, and I will give that to people any day. I'm a big fan of like the rational process, double blind tests, like recording observations, improving on what we've done in the past. I'm all for that. So, but that being said, one of the blind sides of people who are into scientism is first off, like making the assumption that is going to cover philosophy, because philosophy is about oughts. And science is about descriptive natures. So it's like, science can tell you what happens when somebody gets shot. Philosophy can tell you whether you should shoot them. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like science is never going to make a moral quandary or a moral ought. But anyhow,
well, and that's my problem with Anne. That's my problem with Ayn Rand. I used to be kind of an objectivist. I think like most people were at some point in time in their life, until I realized that that's just absurd. But the idea that she had a structure that I think accurately describes certain parts of things, but she tried to apply it to everything. I think that's kind of an issue when you're like, my thing covers everything. It's like a podiatrist that's like, I can solve every problem through the foot. It's like, okay, well maybe, but I don't think so. Like there are other parts of the body. And
it's dangerous academically, because it's like it causes these scenarios where you have like STEM-based programs getting highest priority, and then you see the humanities getting thrown out the window. But the problem is, without the humanities, there's no like ought to STEM. And like, and also, like ethics and things like that. But one of the things that I just want to wrap the brief point I was going to tack on to what you were saying. There was this interesting take on ethics and on science in general, because I remember seeing a scientist who was just blatantly saying science just describes everything. And somebody had just a question for them, which was like, well, why can you trust your observations? I mean, science, like, just viewing that scientifically, like, why should like the laws of physics be the same tomorrow? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, in theory, you shouldn't really expect repetition, or even trust your observations. And so like, there's definitely more to things than, so I don't think it's really like, I agree with you. I don't think it's illogical to have a view, even though you and I have differing views. It's like, I don't think it's illogical to have a view that's, purely scientific and like purely, I think it's depressing to have that view, but if it's just purely scientific, I don't think that's illogical. I also don't think it's illogical to just accept the fact that there is, at the core of science itself, there's ethics and kind of a certain faith, right? Like,
I think,
and I don't mean that in the typical kind of like debate bro religious guy kind of way.
I actually agree quite a bit, and I don't begrudge anyone of any ideology, whether it be religious or agnostic or atheistic. I completely understand not believing in God. There's a lot of reasons to go that way. And I completely understand believing in God in different ways. But I do think that every piece of knowledge comes with an element of faith. And I think we're using that in the same way, because like, you have to extend a certain amount of trust or belief into something, because it is impossible for you to prove everything. And so like, I can't see some of the things, but I can trust experts that they have seen them, or they have the equipment to measure it, or whatever. But I even know that they have to act on faith, and that there are certain things that they can't observe, but they can observe things that maybe be affected by them. And the thing that they're explaining kind of explains why they think some of those things are being affected. And you have to take on faith that certain rules are constant and certain things like that. And so at every point, you have to, at some point in time, say, I'm going to defer to some level of expertise or assumption or belief system, whether that be religious or scientific or logical or creative. Awesome. So I think, I agree. So anyway.
Okay. Back on the rails. Let me ask another question. Sorry. This is why Cory and I, when we used to do 48-hour art check, would talk till like 3 a.m. Like, right. Because it's just fun. And again, like, I love that kind of, to me, I think that's one of the greatest things about esoteric crumble flux is it's kind of showing a lot of your interests, and like the kinds of conversations we would have like late in the night, like are suddenly becoming these really awesome illustrations that are very deep and profound, and I think really cool.
And I hope they serve as one of the reasons that I put them on products is I hope they serve as conversation starters for people.
Yeah.
Like I want people to be able to say, like, what does unplug to connect mean, and to have a conversation about it. So yeah.
I love that. And I love all oh man, it's great. You sneak in the Vitruvian Man into that one. It's just so good. Yeah. Okay. And that has multiple layers of meaning when you're talking, because it's also like a person in a box. Okay. And anyhow, Gary says, Gary Hodges sent some questions in, and then we'll get to chat. So if you guys have questions for Cory or comments for Cory, please like fill up the chat, and we'll get to them if we can. Gary says, my impression is that you typically have a specific idea in mind when you sit down to create a piece of art. Do you ever approach your work intuitively and let the point reveal itself as you work, or even later?
That's a great question.
It's a really great question. Yeah,
I've done Gary. All three. I've done all three. So there are times when I have a very clear message and I know exactly how I want to approach that message. There are other times where I have kind of an inkling of a message, but as I'm exploring the symbolism of that message, the message clarifies itself through the visuals. And then I have other times where I have imagery that I would like to play with, and I in playing with it, a message develops itself. And so probably the most common is the second one, where it's kind of a combination of the two. I typically am this one that's on the screen right now is a really good example. My initial, which maybe I'll try to find that, my initial composition for this was awful. It was really horrible and quite ugly. And I spent a long time trying to shine that turd until I kind of abandoned it and found something much better that actually allowed for, in simplifying the composition, I allowed myself to add like 5 or 6 more layers of symbolism that I couldn't fit in this other much more complicated composition.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there are times that I do all 3 of those, but more commonly than not, I think I've got a message that is mostly clarified, but still a little bit of ambiguity, and then I've got some idea of some of the visuals, and through the exploration of the combination of those 2 things, I find more of each.
I love it. I also was just realizing, like, one of the things I also really like about the fact that these are products is something I've loved forever, which is the idea of like subverting like material that is usually used to kind of like program people, and it's almost like deprogramming using the same like mug and t-shirt and stuff that, like, you know, a big corporation would be like trying to kind of sell you a bad idea with. You're kind of subverting it, and I love that.
You'll really enjoy my anti-phone phone cases that I'm coming out with soon.
I just think that's great. And
I was going to ask you about that, Cory, because you mentioned that earlier. Is that something you're going to talk about, or is that something?
Yeah, I'll show you. Let me show. I've only got one designed right now, but I'll give you a little sneak peek. This is the distraction. The distraction
nice.
rectangle.
I love it.
And so what you'll see in the distraction rectangle is you will see elements of the kind of Illuminati and Masonry that's on currency. You will see some thinkers being distracted. There's also illuminated or kind of like wood engraved illustrations of Ophelia, who was driven mad by distraction in Hamlet. And then some more modern things like spray paint stencils and hypnotic swirls and stuff. So
I love it. I also I think of Werner Herzog. That just sounds like the way Werner Herzog would describe a cell phone, where it'd be like the distraction rectangle.
Yeah.
But that is amazing. That's so great.
The next one I'm doing is the disconnection machine. So
I love it.
That'll be a fun one.
I feel like that might not be bad for people to have on their phone either, because it's like a reminder, like where you're indulging in.
Reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully
everything in moderation.
Yeah, and hopefully, like, you know, because I don't hate technology. I'm actually a really tech savvy guy, and I really enjoy a lot of technology. I've just found that I enjoy my life more if I enjoy technology where I choose to engage with it rather than letting it choose to engage with me.
Yeah. There's a certain extent that, that's just an amazing point. Okay. Let's get to Gary's second question, and then we will get to chat. If you want your question prioritized, this is me totally hustling for money here. Send a super chat. We'll prioritize it. We'll read it next. Otherwise, we're going in order as they were sent. Okay.
Frank has a good question, and Thomas has a good question too. So.
Yeah, I loved Frank's question. I can't wait to get to it. Okay, so second question of Gary's, and then it's all chat from there. And after Gary, we'll go straight to Frank's, unless we get a super chat, and we'll go straight to the super chat. Okay. Your art pieces are often paired with an essay. Please share your thoughts on the difference between the idea communicated verbally versus visually.
There are a couple pieces where I will never tell anyone what I intended, because I find what people get out of it is way more fascinating than what I intended. There's a couple of those. But for the most part, I hesitate to write the essays because I do find it really fascinating to hear what people have to say, because they're bringing their own experiences and their own biases and their own understanding of things. And it colors their perception of everything. Right. And so, like, the way that we perceive different things is all filtered through the way that we see the world. I do feel like I'm ruining it a little bit by doing the essays. But at the same time, they like eat their way out of me. Like I have immersed myself in that topic so much during that week that it's really difficult for me to not have an outlet that's very specific instead of very symbolic.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a challenge, but I would never disagree with somebody who disagreed with my essay. If they had a different interpretation of something that I made, I think that is equally as valid as the interpretation that I intended. And
I think it's great. I think it's great that you're providing that, though, and I encourage people, if you haven't signed up for Cory's newsletter, you should, because it, for those who care, they're going to read it and kind of be interested in your intention.
Read and listen and watch. You have all three options. So however you like your information, I've got it covered.
And I think I think it's worth doing, but it's like also for people who just dig the imagery and want to read whatever into it, that's always an option, too. So but I would encourage people who, especially, there's so much thought behind what Cory does. It's really fun to see the kind of the gears. And I also think, like, even for those ones where maybe some of it arose as it was getting created, mm-hmm. I think that's kind of cool, because that reminds me of like the structure of music, like how music works, where it's like sometimes you're writing lyrics and then like 5 years later you look at the lyrics you wrote or the poem you wrote or whatever, and you're like, that's what I was talking about at the time. Yeah. Like, you can see it so clearly, but you're like, I have no idea in the process, so it's, I think that's great. We've got so many good questions.
The discovery of creativity is amazing. I think that's actually why I started talking about this. I started teaching a class called Intentional Creativity, which I wrote. And, it's amazing, not because I've done anything amazing, but because the students have decided to eliminate distraction from their lives at certain points in time during the day and then add in creative practices to fill that gap. And they are having profound experiences with that. And it's not because I've lectured or whatever. It's because that they're choosing to create space for creativity. But what I love about creativity is that in the process of creating, no matter if you are good or bad at it, from a qualitative standpoint, in the process of creating, there is some internal discovery that happens every time. And I love that. I love that. I can't think of many other things in the human experience that allows us to discover things about ourselves in such a deep and almost unexplainable way. So the discovery portion of that is always really fun, which is why I think everyone else's interpretation of my work is as equally valid as my own.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. There's this Goth, I think. I can never pronounce his name right, but he's like one of the forefathers of like criticism, and one of his rules for criticism was to just kind of break down three questions, like, what is the artist trying to say? How well are they saying it? And then, is it worth saying? That's a really good format for critique, but I think that's actually like a really good point, that whatever people read into it is going to be geared on how specific you are visually kind of communicating the idea. And there's some ideas that, again, like the bees, where it's like you're just planting a seed to get people thinking, and then there's a deeper essay if they want to go deeper.
And then there's something like this, where this is just kind of on the nose. There's not much deeper than I hate politicians, and I think I think carrion insects that are attracted to crap and degradation and decay are a pretty good symbolism of the annoying influence of politics and politicians. So
100%. Yeah. I once heard somebody say that like all sane people would not be attracted to political office. So basically, we're just picking between lunatics. Right. So okay, let's get to. Well, wait. I think, did we handle? Okay, we did handle Gary's question. So now we're going to go to the chats. We got a great question from Frank. I think this is a really profound question. He said, question for Cory. Have you ever had to turn down work because it conflicts with your faith?
I have, and other times I wish I had. I don't believe that gambling is that great, and so I have turned down doing intro animations for video gambling slot machines in gas stations in Nevada one time. And then other times when I should have, I think I was more excited about the fact that I could and didn't think about whether I should. I have probably added to some people's body image issues by over photoshopping a little bit at times. So if I could go back, I probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But there have been times when I turned some stuff down because it didn't align with something I wanted to promote, because I felt like it was hurting people. And there are other times when I probably should have turned some stuff down that I didn't, and I was young and capable, but not conscious of the results. So it's a really good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah, that is. I mean, even from somebody who's not necessarily like a religious person, there's certain things that I'm like, no, I'm not. That's not something that I want to do.
Yeah, so I thought that might be a fun one to kind of open up. Line. Yeah, that would be a fun one to open up to all of us, because I think we've all had times where we've turned down work for specific reasons. I think if you're in this field long enough, you'll find out your ethics pretty quickly. Scott, has there been work you've turned down? I was just kind of curious about that, for ethical reasons that you've turned down, Scott.
There has, and I'm trying to remember specific examples, but
I can name one while you're thinking about it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I had a time where I was in a similar position to where I am now, where I was like, there was no job, except I wasn't in a similar position because there was no like severance or anything like that. And my wife and I had just moved to Oregon, so it's like I'm desperate for money. And the recession hit and took out my biggest client, which was Merrill Lynch at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had a expectation of work from them for like the whole year. And so it's like, with the recession, they paid up what they owed, but the rest of like what we were going to do contractually, like they had to default on because of course they went bankrupt. And so I lost like $40,000 worth of work after expending like $15,000 to $20,000 for a move, and we didn't have any savings. And so I was like, oh boy, and I was just screwed. So I was like desperate for work, and this guy was like basically offered me like a pornographic comic, and I was like, and he said $250 a panel for comic pay. And keep in mind, this is like back in like the Bush recession, okay? Like this is a long time ago.
You're going to start doing 16 panel grids every page?
Yeah, what's sad is comic pay doesn't really ever change or improve most of the time. So like that's still pretty good pay. Like if you have like a 5-panel page, like 250 times 5, like for comic pay, that's good. So I was like, okay, I'll take a look at the script. And I was like ready to do it. And I read through the script, and every other line was like, this happens and she's not enjoying it.
Ooh.
And every other line was like, and she's not enjoying it. And she looks like she's not enjoying it. And I was like, okay, I am not taking this. I don't care how much money you have, Mr. Rapey dude who wrote the script. I am not touching this with a 10-foot pole. And from that point on, I never would have really considered taking that work. But again, it was like your typical kind of story about people taking that line of work where it's like, well, I really needed money. Right. But I was surprised because it was like, I was kind of surprised I drew that line because I really needed that money. Yeah. And I was like, I can't do it. And the guy like even ups the ante. He's like, are you sure you wouldn't do it for like $300 a panel? And I'm like, no, you got to find somebody else. that was like one of those. I mean, there's been other times, but that's the one that comes to mind the most, where I was just like, oh, I guess I have ethics. Anyhow, anything for you, Scott, that comes to mind?
I don't know. I've had situations like that before, not necessarily with the like she's not enjoying it type of thing, but I may have turned down stuff like that, but it's not that I have a problem with anyone that does that. It just, for one, I don't think I'd be very good at that, and two, I don't know. But I don't know. I have kind of been fairly mercenary in the stuff that I do, even if it's not like I've done stuff like I don't really do other than alcohol. I don't really do any drugs or anything, but I've done stuff for like legal, like pot and things like that, and but that's nothing that I would like put in my portfolio or anything. So there's certain things like that, and I guess I'd draw the line with whether I want to have my name attached to it. And sometimes it's not even really anything controversial. It's just like, it's not, I don't know. I'm just not interested in doing that. So
yeah, and
I'm sure there's other examples I'm not thinking of, but
I'm guessing, Scott,
things and
like you would be like doing something for maybe legal weed, but I think if somebody was like, "Hey, buddy, we want to do like a illustration promoting heroin use," you might be like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to happen." So there's like a place you draw the line. I'm similar where I'll take. Like I've done work for like Bud Light back in the day. Like I did like an app illustration and stuff like that. I had no problem promoting beer. I don't care, if that illustration was like, draw somebody drinking and driving in like a positive light, I'd be like, okay, yeah, we're not doing that.
I don't know who would actually do that, but I would definitely turn that down. But
unless it was satirical, and then I might take it,
right. And if it was, and a lot of I have turned down stuff for like weed or whatever, because I don't know that culture, so I'm not the best person. But like sometimes it's like,
sure you don't, Scott. No, I'm just kidding.
But sometimes if it's like an interesting or like it's like an illustration or something, and a lot of times I have to ask, oh, what's this, or I haven't done a lot of that, but it's just there's just certain things I don't. I prefer to do work that I have some sort of vested interest in it.
Yes.
Especially nowadays. Nowadays I turn a lot of that stuff down. But before, kind of when it was like, oh, I really could use this, then, it's kind of a different story. But even then I would draw the line at certain things. Like
I will say, working in-house for a previous employer, when I had to do a bunch of promotional materials for the Republican National campaign in Cleveland, that was not a fun moment of my life, but I sucked it up and did my job, But I will say, if that was my own business, I wouldn't have touched that with a 10-foot pole.
I've done my fair share of videos for multi-level marketing companies, and I am like diametrically opposed to multi-level marketing.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to work for a multi-level marketing for a company, but I wasn't. I just.
It's not a pyramid scheme, guys. It's just legs. That's all. It's legs.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was getting into pyramid schemes and said that they like drew a triangle when they were doing their presentation for us, and I was like, that kind of looks like a pyramid, and they're like, no, see, it's like you got like your body, and then you need two legs, right, and then those legs need two legs, and I'm like, okay, it's a pyramid. Yeah. Speaking of pyramids, there's a lot of pyramids in your work, and we should get back to Cory questions. So let's see here. Okay. Frank said, Cory, did the Save the Insects Foundation get after you for put your heart into it? Oh yeah, was anybody offended?
I had a kind of quasi mentor who was a little shocked at the gun violence in that short, and I don't know if he was offended, but he did say, it is very important that you make it very clear that children should not watch this short. So it's like, okay.
Well, do you have a lot of children lining up to watch that?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of children are really super interested in watching, kind of an expose on the, the kind of like proletariat being screwed over by the conglomerates. But yeah. Anyway,
I like it. Let's see. Okay, Frank was just saying the vanishing bees problem was predicted on an episode of Doctor Who. They're aliens who returned home to escape the destruction of the Earth that's coming. Maybe that's the truth of it. Let's see here. We're finding
they're not actually currently vanishing. There's colony collapse as a threat. So
nice. And
rumors of their demise have been greatly exaggerated. It's just a real possibility.
Yeah. And it is a frightening possibility too, because if you look at look deeper into it, it's very disturbing. It's not a conspiracy. It's like a literal pending
a major part of the food chain disappears, and then that causes a ripple effect through the rest of the food chain. So,
okay, so we got I don't know if this is so much a question, but Ronnie said, Cory, you always do a great job bringing light to a problem with a medium or say language that everyone in the world can understand. That is actually a question I was going to ask, is relating to what he said. Are you trying to make these palatable? Is a question I ask, because I feel like I might know the answer, and I don't think it's going to be like a yes or no, but I don't know.
As most of my students have discovered, my answer to most things is it depends. But yeah, no, I think I'm a communication professional before I'm a creative, and so my career, my bread and butter over the last 20 years has been in professional communication, and that's actually, I don't teach in an art department, I teach in a communication department. And I think one general rule of thumb is some of the worst writers are the ones that you have to like read with a thesaurus and a dictionary next to you because they're trying to show off. And so,
yeah,
I am at all times attempting to be understood, which I think lends itself towards clarity and simplicity. I am not good at this while speaking, but I think in writing, I am better at eliminating redundancy. And so I think if you're going for clarity and you're going for succinct writing, a natural outcropping of that is that you write at more of like a 5th or 6th grade level of vocabulary and phraseology rather than at like a collegiate or postgrad level. And so I myself have difficulty reading like postgraduate style writing, and so because it's so much work, and so I think I naturally lean towards clear communication, at least attempts in that direction. So that is a huge compliment. I appreciate Ronnie saying that, because early on, before my wife realized that this was hurting my feelings, she used to often tell me, listening to you talk is like reading a really boring textbook. And I was like, oh, that's incredibly offensive. Thank you. So I'm glad I'm more interesting and clear than early newlywed Malia thought. So,
it's an interesting thing with that. Like, I remember reading theory that I like just hated because it was so full of like that over jargoned, like really ridiculous, like very redundant kind of speak of like what you consider post-grad. And I remember the first time I took a crack at writing my own thesis for my MFA, I used some of the vocabulary, and my committee was like, why aren't you talking like you talk? And so I redrafted it to actually just talk like I would talk, and I got a much better grade on it. And they said actually it's like a pet peeve of a lot of MFA committees that like people want to get all snarky and jargon filled, and it's like, no, just like maybe explain why you make art, like and get deep into it. You don't have to get like, I mean, you should be smart about it, but and that's great. That's kind of the answer I was expecting.
Clarity is always better than ambiguity. I will say one time in my life, intentionally being ambiguous was helpful, and it was when, and this is going to be a little bit sensational, but maybe not for this crowd. I was in an art criticism master's level class, and I didn't understand it because I didn't get what we were trying to do, what we were talking about. And so I spent a long time with the teacher trying to figure out what it was that she was trying to get me to understand and what I was that she was trying to get me to produce. And so after literally like 90 minutes during our office hours one time of this back and forth where I'm seeking clarity, she seems to be dodging anything clear. And so I finally said, I think I understand. I had no idea, but I just wanted to be done talking. And so I think I understand now. She said, okay, good. So then I sat down to write a paper, and with the full intention of writing total nonsense with all of the jargon that I had been kind of like absorbing, I wrote something that was the most pretentious, nonsensical, irrational criticism. And she loved it, and she was so excited that I finally understood.
You finally figured it out. You finally put on the emperor's clothes.
Yes, and I think I finally did understand that. That I put on the emperor's clothes and played my part for the grade for that. But that was the one time where I intended to be just obscure.
Oh, I love that. Oh man, that's too funny. Okay, let's see here. I think we might be caught up. Let's see here. Oh, Thomas
had one.
Thomas said, Cory, what disadvantages do you think you had starting art so late? And more importantly, what were some of the advantages? And by the way, to be clear, you guys, like Cory started drawing a little bit, like seriously, like trying to draw a little bit late. He had drawn when he was younger. And then also keep in mind that he was doing photography for quite a while before that. So he did have, and maybe that can cue you off to
and graphic design and videography. Yeah. And so I was professionally in 3 disciplines that I'll use, composition, and visual communication. And so I think the biggest thing that I missed out on is time on tools. And so I still lack, even 10 years after I started, or I guess 11 years after I started, I think I still lack a lot of the basics that I should have gotten like really early. I'm not great at anatomy. Any logical thing is a little bit easier to understand, but any of the stuff where you've got to kind of feel it out, I feel like some of that just comes with thousands of hours of drawing, and I feel a real lack in some of those more fluid gestural things. And so I think just I missed out on about 25 years of drawing that I should have been doing, and I think one of the best things that you can do to get good as an artist is get all the bad drawings out. And sometimes there's thousands of them, and sometimes there's tens of thousands of them. And I think I'm still, to a certain extent, running some of those bad drawings out of my system. And typically people don't get to see those publicly. So I'm still doing that. I do think on the flip side of that, this is less of a technique and execution thing, but I think mentally and emotionally, choosing to live a creative life is a very vulnerable and taxing thing to do. I think it's you're living a little bit more on the nerves, the edge of the nerve, a little bit raw, and you have to accept a little bit of vulnerability. Because I mean, nobody looks at an accountant's spreadsheet and says, "I don't like it." It's like no one at a glance can tell whether an accountant is good at their job or not, or whether they're experienced or inexperienced. They just look like an accountant, But with art, everybody feels like they have an opinion, and they do, because they are the consumers of the things that we create. And so that's very vulnerable. And then I also think to get to a place where you're creating something authentically is very emotionally taxing at first. And I think you get better at it. But the first couple of years were rough. I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, and I still deal with that, but I am better at dealing with it. I dealt with a lot of self-doubt. I dealt with a lot of anger, a lot of negative self-talk. I was very critical of myself and the things that I was producing. And I think the maturity of being able to do that later, I probably handled a lot of that better than I would have if I was 14 or 17 or 22. Yeah, I think, I think being in your 30s and already being kind of like a well-rounded, somewhat established and emotionally intelligent adult, kind of helped quite a bit when I just was hit with the broad force of, recognizing the deep lack that I have in something that I wanted to be good at.
Yeah, and that's like actually a huge part of the learning process in art is kind of being able to see where, your weaknesses are and your strengths are. It's such a like self-analytical field that I could see that being one of the primary struggles. I feel like you may not be giving yourself enough credit to the things that you had acquired that did help you get it and kind of also grow like quite like exponentially in your skill.
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said for that, that I think you should definitely at least give yourself credit for,
There is, but that double-edged sword cuts both ways because I skipped the first part of Dunning-Kruger where you think you're amazing because you don't know that much. Because I knew just enough to recognize how bad it really was. And so I was able to put together good compositions. I was able to put together good things, but the elements that I was using and arranging in those compositions were still bad. And so, my line work was bad. My line work was not confident. The shapes that I was producing lacked. They were stiff and lacked a lot of fluidity and emotion. My storytelling was pretty straightforward and formulaic. But the challenge is when you're starting art normally and you're doing that as a kid, you just don't know any of that. So whereas when I was able to, I feel very uncomfortable saying this out loud, but I was able to get to a level of competency very quickly. But the entire time I felt every fault. And it's difficult knowing for a fact that you cannot make it better at this time, but you know exactly what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
That's hard. And so, so it is a double-edged sword. I do think I'm trying to be real and honest, and it sounds very prideful for me to compliment myself, but you're correct. I was able to get to at least a level of competency. I don't know if good is the right description, but I got better fast. But the whole time that I was getting better was really rough. And even to this day, I can often see what's wrong. And I remember thinking, like when I was getting my master's, because I started getting my master's about 2 years after I started drawing in illustration at SCAD. And so I was way out of my depth. And I remember spending 17 and a half hours on this still life drawing. And I remember recognizing I have reached the envelope. I know that this is not as good as it could be. And I also know that this is as good as I can make it at this time. So then I was done. So yeah. Anyway,
I love that description.
That image has been stolen many times on the internet, by the way. So it's probably worth something, I guess.
I love it. It's a really it's really well done. Let's see here. Would you consider this radical? I don't know what chugi. I don't know what is chugi. I don't know what chugi is.
Chugi is, I can't remember exactly. I think it means cringy, but I can't remember. It is a term that was popular for about 5 minutes amongst Gen Z, and and I've heard people actually use it in earnest, but yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's
unless you teach college kids, you probably don't know it.
Yeah,
I guess.
I was kind of joking. I've been doing I've mentioned that I've been doing like some commentary and stuff on my stream, and like one of the things I was noticing with a political guy, I'm not going to bring up who it is, but was the fact that he was kind of doing like the Steve Buscemi, like, "Hey, cool kids," and I'm like, I'm willing to kind of admit when I have no idea what the hell the slang is. I'm 40, you know, like I have no idea, Jake. Anyhow,
Jake is saying chuggy is the opposite of trendy.
Oh, nice.
And if that's the case, then I would say my natural reaction to most things is to rebel against the popular. So I have a really difficult time liking things that other people like. I kind of want to tear down everything that is popular. So.
I love it. That's amazing. Okay, Scott, you got any other questions that you wanted to hit with? I
think
with
Jim
Cory
had a question because we were going to do this last time we were going to do this. Let me see if I can find that.
Oh, perfect.
Question. Right. Oh, I closed down. I'll have to get back to it because I closed down all my windows. So I have to go back
while you're doing that, Jake has a good question. Do you consider your visual grammatics to be too clear at times, like anchoring the meaning too hard? Yes, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. So, and then sometimes when I think I'm being really obvious, it's because I'm using something that I didn't know was maybe a little bit more obscure, and I think it's just going to be like really on the nose, and it's not as on the nose as I thought. And so I find it fascinating when you're using symbolism and you're layering symbolism on top of symbolism, and you're using symbolism from different cultures and different time periods. Sometimes it mixes to be really on the nose and super obvious, and sometimes it becomes so obscure, but you feel like it's really obvious.
Yeah.
I've been living in that world for that week while I was making that illustration, and so to me it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be totally obvious. You know, a cat with a third eye, that's just like super on the nose, and then you show it to people and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, what does it mean? And you're like, oh, it's not like really in your face. So yeah, I don't know, but sometimes I'm like, politicians suck, and they kind of just remind me of flies being attracted to crap, so I'm going to be super obvious in that one. And then other times I'm like, just want people to get like a general vibe, but not necessarily a specific message. And so I try to be a little bit more leaning into the emotion of the thing and less into the literal symbolism of the thing.
Yeah,
and, sometimes I fail miserably at what I intend to do, and it ends up somewhere else.
That does like sound like because it kind of ties a little bit into the earlier question too about like how clear you're trying to be with your communication on it, and it's like, to me, that that's what you're showing with your art is like, I definitely read it where there's times where you're leaving a lot up to the mind to just kind of fill in the blanks, maybe just causing a couple questions to like just go through. And sometimes it's just cool. Like, right. Yeah. But I think like when you're trying to be really clear, like you are very clear. And but it is funny how I do like your description of things that you might think are like, oh, come on, this is so on the nose. And then there's people who are just like, oh, this is cool, what does it mean? And you're like, oh, okay, it's not.
Yeah.
Awesome. Scott, any look with the Luhan?
So
awesome.
And this kind of goes back when Cory was talking about he finds it really difficult to like things that other people like. So this is a question from Jim Luhan. My question for Dr. Kerr: tell us something you like that would surprise us. And you can't say Striper. I was just kidding.
Oh, I can't, because I don't know if I like them or not. I've never heard them. Something I like that would surprise you. Oh, man. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of an open book. I try not to hide things, and Something I like that would surprise.
Something that would be atypical from what we would think, even if you are kind of an open book. That you.
I really like. I don't even want to bring up music because
Frozen
every time
yogurt.
we start talking about music, it goes into the woods. But I really enjoy angry girl indie music. Like that's really fun. That's probably a bit surprising. I think other things that I really enjoy that would surprise people. I don't know. I got to come back to that. I think that's. I'm looking around the room and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a. I enjoy enjoying things. I don't know if that's kind of surprising because I think probably if you've read, watched, or listened to anything that I've done in the last 20 years, you might think that I'm fairly pessimistic and angry and dour, but I actually really I intend to enjoy most of the things that I experience, and so I think that might be a little surprising. Like when I go to movies, I think I have the ability to rip them to shreds, but like I paid money for a fun experience, and I intend to enjoy that experience, and so I really like.
Are you saying you don't root for movies to fail?
No, I want to have a good evening.
Because there's a lot of people out there like that on the internet.
Yeah, I am so cheap that I will find any reason to like the movie that I paid money to watch. It's very seldom. Like it's got to be like Transformers 4 level bad for me to really dislike it. Now, whether or not I will ever rewatch it, that's a different level of thing. But yeah. So yeah, I think yeah. I don't know.
I love it.
Oh, it's things. That's a great question, and it's really got me reeling now. I don't have a really good answer to it.
I love that. That's a hard question.
I think that I'm optimistic is probably pretty surprising to most people.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't understand that about people who are openly skeptical, that quite a lot of skeptics are optimists. Like it's kind of like part of skepticism. Like it what leads you to skepticism, a lot of the same kind of blood in there can lead to very wild positive things. And I can second that Cory is
Cory's
a very positive
person about that. How, when it's a lot, sometimes we kid Cory about the doom and gloom stuff, but he really does have he has. I mean, you do see the bright side of things, and
yes,
you
on this spinning ball in the center of the universe, that we are all Sisyphean like pushing our boulders across. Yes. No, look, Cory is one of the most positive people I know. Let's see here. What did we get here?
Thomas.
Thomas was saying, do you consider yourself a bit of a contrarian? Like, do you ever catch yourself? I'm curious, actually, your answer to this. Would you consider yourself a contrarian?
Probably. I am so resistant to acknowledge that it's possible to label me as something that I will usually abandon things immediately upon being labeled. And so as soon as I'm now in this paradox of I probably am a contrarian, but like I don't want to be labeled as such, and so I will immediately start agreeing with things just so that you can't say that about me. I mean, I really enjoy drawing and animating insects, and as soon as I started to be known as like the insect guy, I was like, that's it. And I don't think I drew another insect for like 3 years.
I love it.
So probably, I think I naturally am fairly rebellious. I find rebellion to be a really useful part of society. If it weren't for people saying, that sucks, I don't like that, I'm going to do something about it, then like we would still own black people and only men could vote. And well, there probably wouldn't be democracy. Like, I mean, like we probably wouldn't have organized government at all. We would probably still be just beating each other to death with wooden sticks. I mean,
what's sad, Cory, is there's a group of people who are just you're listing off their fantasy. They're like, oh man, we don't get to have that. Anyhow,
I would love to go back to the subsistence living of just pure violence. Wouldn't that be great to not know whether your village was going to be burnt down in the night while you were sleeping? Toxic masculinity at its best.
I love it. We've gone an hour and 30 minutes. There's so many more questions I want to ask, though.
Okay, lightning round. I'll be fast.
Okay. So, Cory, what keeps you on task? I'm curious about your organizing. I've heard about it, but I don't know if everybody's heard about it. What is your method of you do very complicated things like very ambitious animations, and you will probably be humble and be like, they aren't that ambitious. But they are. They're very ambitious. They're very they've won awards and stuff like that. And they require a lot of different components and facets and a lot of planning. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you've even talked about this on Artcasters before, but I think that you are one of the best people to talk about back planning. So I was wondering if you could explain your method of back planning just very shortly, and also what are your tools that you use to kind of keep yourself on task when you're juggling a million projects.
I like how we go to a lightning round and you give me a 5-part question. That's really complicated.
Favorite color.
I think what keeps me going is running from my demons. I think I hate boredom and repetition so much that I often will complicate problems that I'm working on so that they offer a challenge and are interesting. And I find overcoming those challenges and achieving a new level of skill, ability, or something very motivational. And so I will often try to build a project around something that I don't know how to do so that I'm forced to learn it. As far as back planning goes, I guess I don't think this is easy, but for me, it comes very naturally. I hate it, but it comes very naturally to begin with the end in mind, look at the end result, break that into component parts, find the interdependencies of what needs to be done before something else can be accomplished, what can be concurrently done while something else is happening, order those, estimate an amount of time, and then just go from when you want it to finish to today and see if it's possible. And so I use Trello and a series of kind of homemade Gantt charts with spreadsheets if it gets too complicated. But other than that, if I'm on a project too long, I don't like it start to not do well, and it starts to lose its luster. And so there's a bit of a drive to just finish it, ship it, because I know I'm going to hate it no matter what, move on, and go enjoy the process of making something else I'm going to hate later.
That leads me to my lightning round question. So, Cory, you've been known to do projects and spurts. This is the project I'm working right now. Now I'm doing this thing. What's the longest you've stuck with a particular project, and what was that project?
Good question.
Probably the first thing I did while I was drawing, The Mixed, which I have eradicated from the internet. Is a 60-page comic that took me maybe 14 to 18 months. I mean, at the beginning I was quite slow, but eventually I got to about a page a week, which was penciled ink, fully colored, lettered, and written. So I got a little bit faster for having a full-time job. I know that's not professional comic speed, but for side project work, I thought that was pretty fast. But I stuck with that. I stuck with that for over a year, probably a little bit longer, probably closer to a year and a half. I'd have to go look. Recently, the longest one was Shades, and that just drug on because I was collaborating with students, and so I had to teach them stuff, and then I had to critique their stuff, and then I had to really slow down to make that work. And then when I tried to shoot the live action portion with my buddy, like, it was like pulling teeth because every time we set up a shoot and we got the permits from the city and we got the actors' schedules to line up, it would like frickin' snow. And it was like, or be I mean, we literally shot that final scene in like a microburst windstorm that was not on any weather app or prediction that happened. It was like, that took an extra 5 months that I didn't anticipate, but I wasn't working on it the entire time. It just, I couldn't finish it because I was waiting for the weather to cooperate and people's schedules to align. So that was torture for a while until I finally decided I need to start another project to do while I'm waiting, or I'm going to go nuts, because I would just sit there and be annoyed that I couldn't do anything on that project that day. So probably those two were the longest. I mean, Esoteric Crumbleflux, if you consider it a single project, which it's kind of a series of projects. I've been doing that since before the beginning of the year. So that's pretty long for me to work on something for longer than 6 months. So
nice. You guys don't screw it up. Don't call Cory the Crumble Flux guy, okay? Just don't do it. That's great. Okay, so real quick, when you're in the face of obstacles, right? What is your go-to us outside of like just religious belief system and family? Because those are going to be the two first ones, I'd imagine.
Oh, I have a really good answer for this. You're talking obstacles like in life, not in art, just generally.
Yeah, it could be life or art.
Yeah. Art is harder for me to have obstacles with, but in life, as some people may know, I know you guys do. I've almost died quite a few times, like an unnatural amount of times.
I feel like you might be vying for like a world record there.
Yeah. I have found this Tig Notaro. If you guys haven't seen Tig do her like cancer,
oh, it's so good.
It's one of the most amazing things that's ever been put to tape. She got diagnosed with cancer. The next day she did a set. She's a comedian. The next day she did a set, and she was freaking hilarious, and was also really struggling with the fact that she might die, and that she was probably most likely, and did end up having a double mastectomy and going through horrible chemo and everything. Anyway, but it was hilarious. I have found that I love storytelling so much that I have the ability to try to find the humor by imagining what it would be like to tell the story of what is currently happening in the future. And then I can enjoy that thing now. And so I have been in excruciating pain before and just laughing because it's going to be such a great story to tell later. I just find it humorous. And so I think that's maybe one of the best. I think the darkest time in my recent life was, I found almost nothing funny. This one day I just couldn't, I couldn't move. I had broken basically the entire right side of my body. I was completely helpless, total invalid, and I couldn't find anything humorous about it. I found things humorous about it the day before and later that week, but there were a few days there where I was just like, there is nothing but bleak awfulness. And so when I can find the humor, I find that, and I can imagine saying, like, I don't know. I don't know what's funny about, I can't dress myself, wipe myself, shower myself, pick up my children, or breathe. Yeah. But before and after that, it was hilarious to try to watch me like put on a polo shirt, or, there are a lot of really funny things that happen with that. Like one of the funniest things was showing up to a meeting at work, dragging an oxygen tank behind me. Oh, it was hilarious. I loved it. Just everyone in the room, the reactions that they had and the way that they fell over themselves trying to figure out how to react to this just like broken person dragging this oxygen tank out of the elevator. That was one of the funniest things I think that happened that year.
Well, and you told us that story, and I don't even know if any of us got the humor in it, but I will say, yeah, you are a very resilient person, and that's where like it's always weird to me that people are like, "Is Cory an optimist?" It's like, dude got in a motorcycle accident and was cracking jokes like a week later, and I'm not talking about a minor accident.
In fact, you and Jim and Gary and Scott and everybody had gotten into the habit of making fun of me for always finding a way to get hurt. And then I got really hurt and you all stopped. And I was like, no, you have to continue, because if it's not funny, then it's awful. And so I refuse to accept you being weird about this. You still must make fun of it.
And that's where Jim basically was indulging by sending pictures of like Evel Knievel and stuff in our group chats. Wow, this was a really good one. Is there anything else in the lightning round we want to hit?
I'm bad at a lightning round.
I'm bad at lightning round questions.
5-minute answers.
I feel like we got a lot. I would encourage everybody to check out Cory's work. It's really thoughtful. Hopefully this gave you guys like a little snippet of this is like a micro dose of what the kind of thinking that Cory puts into his work. And also, honestly, you guys should check out, he mentioned the class that he designed. You can check out YouTube videos on his channel that actually talk about all sorts of great practices to kind of like get your mental health in order, to kind of reflect, to be creative, to explore creativity. It's very thoughtful stuff, about like mindfulness and art, and like not in a corny way, like in a very applicable way. And I found it really encouraging and cool. And I think you guys would too. So is there anything we want to close this with? I guess, Cory, what do you want people to do right now? If they could go anywhere related to your art, where's the place they should go first? What should they buy first?
Buy whatever you want. I think, I don't know if this is a fear or this is just a reality of the situation. I think I found myself in an interesting spot because I think I'm making really boring topics. I'm choosing just things that people are totally uninterested in, or if they're interested in it, they're the type of person who also doesn't like the visual style that I'm creating in. And if they're the type of person that likes the visual style that I'm creating in, they're probably not interested in the topic. And so if you found anything interesting tonight, go check out my email newsletter, because there's more where that came from. And I do think it's I'm struggling to find an audience for this stuff a little bit. So I just say, corykerr.com/email will take you to the Substack, and that's got a lot of the stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your agreement, your disagreement, your dissenting opinion.
Wait, people can disagree and still get along, Cory? What is this nonsense?
Yeah, it's almost like the world is full of gray and not black and white.
I love it.
So that's what I'd like.
Great. Okay, and I guess that we'll close out then, and of course we'll go back to you, Cory, in 2 seconds. So you guys are on my channel. If you haven't yet, hit like, hit subscribe, so you get notifications. Hit the bell so you get notifications when I'm about to go live again. I live stream all the time. I might even be live streaming after this. Who knows? I'm a wild man. So make sure you've done that, and consider picking up 2 Stories or Jacob's Apartment, my 2 books. Cory, where can everybody find your work outside of the Substack you just mentioned? Where can they follow you? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, you can go to corykerr.com. And one thing I'm almost certain of is that everybody listening to this right now would enjoy my Do Things Robots Can't Go Make Stuff design, which you can get as a flag. Proudly wave that outside, or a laptop case, or mug, or a shirt or hoodie. So go check that out at corykerr.com/store.
I love it. And there's a lot of great mugs there as well. I always mention the mugs because I know we as creatives, a lot of us are really into coffee or just having mugs in general for water or whatever, because it doesn't hurt to have a mug in your desk. I encourage you guys get some mugs from Cory, and shirts and all that fun stuff. Scott, where can everybody find your work? Where can they see your new YouTube? And then after that, how do they keep track of this whole wacky business?
Yeah, so YouTube channel is CircWorks Art Labs on YouTube. Go there and check out my latest videos if you haven't already. And tell a friend, anyone that you think might be interested in kind of what I'm doing, reverse engineering, nostalgia, novelties from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I've been having a lot of fun with that, and I think a lot of people have fun watching that and hopefully participating, building their own cool stuff too. So just getting it out to the right people. So check that out. Also, I've got a website, circworks.com, where you can find a number of digital products, including the free Comic Maker Starter Kit. You download that and you'll get all kinds of free tools and things like that. And I've got a comic book series, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. If you're into that, if you're into like Stranger Things or go the classics like Goonies and Monster Squad, all that kind of stuff, you'll probably dig it. It's like that, but with zombies. And as Josh mentioned, we do this show every single week, pretty much without fail. Every once in a while, we'll take a break. But if we do, we would probably notify you through our mailing list, our newsletter. And that we don't spam you or anything. All we do is usually tell you when we're going to go live, who the guest is going to be, because usually we typically have a different guest, unless it's just like we're doing right now, one of us. The other thing is it rotates from different channels, a couple different channels, Corey's and Josh's channels. There's some older episodes on my channel, but if you want to know when it's going to be, and the other thing that we want to mention is time. The days, it's typically on a Thursday, but we're going to be switching, at least for, I don't want to say the foreseeable future, at least for a little while, and maybe we'll decide we like that. I don't know, but we're gonna be starting to do it on Sundays. But
what day?
Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah. So join the mailing list and you'll be alerted, because YouTube doesn't always let people know when things are hitting. So definitely check that out.
Awesome. So once you guys have signed up and stuff like that, and then one closing thought I want to hear from Cory. This is my lightning round, closing it out. Why Rocket League?
Oh, Rocket League is fantastic. I love it. Because I don't have a good reason. It's really fun. Yeah,
that's good.
But mainly recently, I've been playing the Miles Morales Spider-Man. That is a phenomenal game.
Nice.
So, yeah, a lot of wish fulfillment in being able to swing around the city as Spider-Man there.
I was gonna say a good Spider-Man game is something I think most of us grew up wanting. So I think if there is a good web slinging action, it fulfills a lot. And I hope you guys all out there are having great web slinging action yourselves. There you have it. Support Cory's stuff, and we'll see you on the next Artcasters. Thanks to everybody in the chats. You guys are the reason we do this, so we really appreciate you. And we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
See ya.